Abortion ban.
The motion to table passes.
Lawmakers in Alabama passed the most restrictive abortion bill in the country. We have a report plus reaction from pro-life lawmakers. Heightened security. The embassy in Iraq is being evacuated amid tensions with Iran. Eye on Africa. A report on the Catholic Church in Ghana. And a member of EWTN tells us about his interview with the president of South Sudan. And backseat boys and girls. Pope Francis has a surprise for migrant children at his weekly talk to pilgrims. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 15th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining me from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. In a case that's raising hopes and fears about the future of Roe v. Wade, Alabama's governor faces a major decision: whether to sign a bill that bans nearly all abortions in the state. Lawmakers passed the bill last night. It would make performing an abortion a felony at any stage of pregnancy. It grants exemptions to save the life of the mother, or if the unborn child has a serious medical problem, but not for rape or incest. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has been following this story. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Planned Parenthood threatens to sue. They call this bill dangerous, but supporters of it hope for that legal fight. They want it to go all the way to the Supreme Court. They hope with a majority of conservative justices, they'll overturn precedent, the 1973 ruling legalizing abortion.
25 ayes, 6 nays, 1 abstention. House Bill 314 passes.
Alabama passes the country's most sweeping ban on abortion.
A life is a life, and even if it is its origins are in very difficult situations, that life is still precious.
It's meant as a challenge to the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade. This bill does allow abortion to save the life of the mother or if there's a deadly problem with the unborn baby. Otherwise, all abortions are felonies.
It's the doctor that's going to go to jail for life. So we had said one time in there, so are we telling her now, go back to the back alleys, go back to where it was before it was legal?
I would hope that no female would do that in the future. I would hope that.
I like the way you said it, but the realities are, if they raped or incest or whatever like that, that may be the only option that they have.
And in my opinion, and the crux of the bill, that life is worth preserving, even at that point.
As the nation debates the future of abortion, we question the state's U.S. senators. One Democrat.
I thought it was shameful.
One Republican.
I have no idea, all I do is read about it. I'm busy here.
Senate Democrats pounce.
It should never have passed. The governor should not sign it, and if she does, it ought to be swiftly struck down by the courts.
Pro-life groups like Priests for Life are urging Governor Kay Ivey to sign the bill. Sponsors of it expect that she will. Now, a Knights of Columbus Marist poll back in February found 29% of Americans either want abortion banned or only allowed to save the life of the mother. That number grows to 58% if you add the exemptions for rape and incest. Lauren?
Well, it seems Congressman Shelby of Alabama hasn't made up his mind yet. We'll have to see what he has to say. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you. And a pro-life congressman is taking on the IRS in his fight to save the unborn. Representative Andy Biggs, a Republican from Arizona, is introducing or has introduced legislation to eliminate abortion as a medical expense that people can deduct from their taxes. Congressman Biggs joins me now from Capitol Hill to tell us about his Abortion is Not Health Care Act. Congressman Biggs, welcome back to the broadcast.
Thanks, Lauren. Good to be with you.
I want to talk about your new legislation, but first, let's get your reaction to the Alabama Senate's passage of a near total abortion ban.
Yeah, well, I support that. The premise for that rests on the idea that an unborn baby, an unborn fetus is a baby, is a person, and is deserving of protection. And that's really what the bill's getting at, and I support it.
Now, let's turn to your proposal, the Abortion is Not Healthcare Act. It amends the IRS code. And you say right now, by allowing taxpayers who do itemized deductions in healthcare, including abortion, the current federal tax code is supporting federal funding for abortion. So explain to our audience how the current system works and what your change would bring.
Yeah, so right now, everybody can, if they achieve a certain amount of medical costs, they get to deduct those costs in itemization. And one of the ways the IRS has interpreted that is to include abortion services. So effectively, you're getting a deduction, which is a subsidy by the taxpayer, because it's saying you're not going to pay your full load of taxes. We're going to reduce those taxes and spread those out elsewhere for medical expenses. And one of those expenses is going to be abortion. So this really, in effect, says, my bill says no more. You're not going to be able to deduct abortion services for a medical care deduction.
What would your act do in order to change it?
It gets right into the IRS code itself and goes to the medical deduction provision saying, look, you can't, you specifically excluding abortion services. That's what will happen. It's actually a small word change, but it has an incredible impact on how you get abortion services and fund them, whether it's going to be taxpayer subsidized through the IRS code or not.
I'm looking at some of the other expenses that qualify, including birth control, fertility treatments, sterilizations, including vasectomies. But you're just focusing on the abortion piece. So how likely is it to get this enacted?
Well, we face an uphill challenge because the House is controlled by my colleagues on the other side who are largely pro-abortion. But there is a significant number of Democrats who are pro-life, and we're trying to get them to help us out with everything from the heartbeat bill to Born Alive bill to now my bill, and see if we can get it over the hill. But if we can get it over the hill in the House, I think we have a decent chance in the Senate. The real tough sledding is going to be in the House.
Well, one of those congressmen is Dan Lipinski, and he's facing quite an uphill battle, it looks like, for his seat. Yeah. And his challenger is really focusing on the abortion issue. Congressman Andy Biggs, member of the House Freedom Caucus, Republican from Arizona. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Lauren. Good to be with you.
The Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, plans to move hundreds of workers to the border. The agency says they will start helping with the inflow of migrants. About 10% of TSA's staff is expected to assist efforts on the southern border. Last month, Customs and Border Protection shifted 700 workers also to the border, and the National Guard has more than 4,000 troops there. Bishop Peter Baldacchino is the new leader of the Diocese of Las Cruces in New Mexico. The 58-year-old has been an auxiliary bishop in Miami since 2014. The Diocese of Las Cruces has about 250,000 Catholics. Police execute a search warrant at the offices of the Catholic Diocese of Dallas. An official says an investigation into sexual abuse allegations against a former priest uncovered claims against 4 others. None of the 5 is in active ministry. The State Department is urging American citizens to leave Iraq immediately due to escalating tensions with Iran. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad is sending all non-essential personnel home. And it's feared that what has been deemed Christian genocide at the hands of ISIS could be replaced by Iranian groups. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee has the details from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says U.S. intelligence shows a possible threat to Americans in and around Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, and Erbil, which is in the Nineveh Plain and home to the majority of the Christians in the nation. He says Iranian-backed militias may be planning to attack U.S. troops near both cities. This as Iran's supreme leader issues a veiled threat to the U.S. and its allies. In a televised speech, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says no one is seeking war. But he also warned it wouldn't be difficult for the Islamic Republic to enrich uranium to weapons-grade levels, a reference to the 2016 Iran nuclear deal, which aimed to limit the country's ability to build nuclear bombs. Since President Donald Trump chose to pull the U.S. out of the deal last year, the White House has increased pressure by imposing hard-hitting sanctions against Tehran. This month, the U.S. ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier to the region. Iran's ambassador to the UK rejects the U.S. attempt to pressure his country.
Some of this can be seen as theatrical maneuvers, but we are also prepared for any eventuality.
Iranian officials reject claims by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that Iran is backing militias who are targeting U.S. troops in Iraq. The secretary mentioned the escalating tension between Washington and Tehran while meeting with his counterpart in Russia this week.
We've also made clear to the Iranians that if American interests are attacked, we will most certainly respond in an appropriate fashion.
A Kremlin spokesman says Pompeo didn't offer President Vladimir Putin reassurances over the escalating crisis. For years, religious and ethnic minorities in Iraq have suffered at the hands of Iranian-backed militias in their country. This town, Bartella, used to be an entirely Christian village. 30 years later, it's been taken over by Iranian groups. The Christian community in Iraq has plummeted in the last 15 years because of attacks by al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Some Iraqi Christians say the Iranian groups treat them just as bad as ISIS in some cases. The Christian advocacy group Open Doors USA says Iraq still remains one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a follower of Christ. Lauren?
Well, it's very upsetting. We know many Americans who are there helping out Iraqis. Thank you so much, correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee, reporting from the State Department. It has been several weeks since the deadly Easter Sunday terror attacks on churches and hotels in Sri Lanka killed 250 people. For the most part, Catholic schools remain closed. Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit said earlier this month he had information a famous church and a lay institution would be attacked, so he delayed the reopening. This week, he told officials the schools could be back open on a case-by-case basis, only if they consult with security officials. And as we told you last week, EWTN is launching a news service in August dedicated to reporting from Africa. In the last 40 years, the number of Catholics on the continent grew by 238%. Tonight, we look at Ghana. The West African country has about 3 million Catholics. This footage was taken from a mass last month in the country's Holy Spirit Cathedral in the capital of Accra. Our next guest works for the Archdiocese of Accra. Augustus Aikins is in Rome on behalf of the Archdiocese and joins us now. Augustus, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you so much, Lauren. How are you doing?
I'm good. The Catholic Church in Africa is growing and has been growing at a phenomenal rate in the last 40 years. What are the biggest challenges that the church faces in Ghana?
Okay, so the biggest challenges the church faces in Ghana has to do with Pentecostalism, where we have a lot of Pentecostal and charismatic churches swaying a lot of Catholic faithful with their prophecies and then their promise of heaven here on earth. The second one has to do with priests. We don't have a lot of priests. For some time now, we've seen the growth, but we still need more priests to be able to solve this issue so that we'll have interaction with our priests one-on-one. And then the third one has to do with the violence we have. Some parts of Africa has a lot of violence, others also don't. So I would mention these three as some of the challenges we are facing.
During the past two synods in Rome, the bishops from Africa have been quite vocal about the needs and the concerns of the church in Africa. Are they being heard? Are things changing? Are some needs now being met?
Yeah, I would say that yes. We sometimes feel that I don't know, on a scale to 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, I would say that our bishops have only 4% or 4. They are not being heard as much as they should because issues in Africa would be different from issues in the US as well as different in other parts of the continent. So if they are listened to more, I think some of the challenges I mentioned earlier on could be solved.
This past Sunday in Burkina Faso, we reported that a gunman killed a priest and 5 worshipers during Mass. Burkina Faso is just north of Ghana. These attacks most likely were by Islamic extremists. How concerned about the safety of Catholics are you, especially those in Ghana and Burkina Faso?
Let me say that I am in the southern part, but I have interactions with my other friends in the northern part of Ghana. And let me say that there's peace within Ghana. between the Christians and the Muslim community. We enjoy peace. We are one together. Recently, let me make mention of this. My Archbishop, who was took canonical possession of my Archdiocese of Accra just some few months ago, on the 1st of March, paid a courtesy call to the chief imam as well as the head of the Ahmadiyya mission in Ghana. So when it comes to the Christians or the Catholic Church and the Islamic community, we are living together as one people. It's unfortunate that with the incident which happened in Burkina Faso, let me say that this it won't happen in Ghana because of the level of peace we have enjoyed.
Augustus Aikins from the Archdiocese of Accra in Ghana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Coming up, the president of South Sudan on how the Catholic Church is helping his country. In South Sudan, a majority Christian country, peace continues to reign after the government extended a deadline for warring factions to form a unity government. A civil war there has raged on for years. EWTN's Alejandro Bermudez traveled to the world's newest country last week to bring us an exclusive interview with South Sudan's President Kiir. He talked about conflict, his concerns, and his recent meeting with Pope Francis, how it changed his life. Last month, President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar accepted an invitation by Pope Francis to come to the Vatican to help promote peace. The Pope kissed their feet.
The humility of the Holy Father to bend down to kiss my feet, I was almost trembling because that thing has not happened before, except at the time when Jesus knelt down to wash the feet of his disciples.
The two signed a peace deal last year, ending a 5-year civil war that killed nearly 400,000 people and displaced millions. The country's Catholic bishops say the deal is fatally flawed because it does not address the root causes of the conflict. About 37% of the population is Catholic. President Kiir credits Catholic missionaries for bringing Christianity to the country.
We learn from their teachings that we must abide by peace among the people.
Historically, peace has been hard to come by. A 2015 deal ended in gunfire. Since South Sudan's conflict began in 2013, USAID has been providing assistance.
I thank the American taxpayers who decided to contribute to the relief of the people of South Sudan. I thank them very much.
Joining me now by Skype from Denver is the man who interviewed the South Sudanese president, Alejandro Bermudez, Executive Director of Catholic News Agency and Así Prensa. Alejandro, nice to see you.
Great to be with you, Lauren.
Watching President Kiir's interview with you, you can feel the impact his historic visit with Pope Francis had on him. What were your impressions of the man who says he wants peace for his country?
I think he is sincere. I think the experience with the Pope that he described when I asked him about why he decided to accept the invitation, he was startled and said, who would not accept an invitation from the Holy Father to a retreat? And so I think he's sincere, but the bishops are right when they say that there are some fundamental flaws. Basically, is creating one single armed forces that are not loyal to warlords, but that will be loyal to the Constitution.
And to the president. The president does not give many interviews, so kudos to you. It's clear, though, that his Catholic faith in this Christian majority nation is really important to him. You talked to him a lot about that.
Yes, it's absolutely important. He explained to us out of camera how the English ruling separated the country in different missionaries and religions, and how the ethnic group to which he belonged, the Dingas, were evangelized mostly by Italian missionaries, that really rooted the Catholic faith deep into the people.
The South Sudanese president also has said good days are ahead. Did you get that sense of optimism from him?
It's hard to tell, Lauren, from the political authorities, but I was invited by the Sudan Relief Fund, which helps the Catholic Church there, and I was impressed of how Catholics, including 7,000 people that have found refuge in church grounds from the different militias, which is the only ground that they respect, are confident that between 6 to 8 months, the situation will allow them to go back to their original places. So yes, there is among people a sense of relief and hope. But again, what the bishop is that if they want this to last, they will have to resolve crucial issues for the future.
Well, I know that Pope Francis has said that he may visit in September, quote, if the time is mature to go there, and he's already called off one previously planned trip there due to civil unrest. So we'll have to see if the Pope is going to step in. Alejandro Bermudez, Executive Director of Catholic News Agency, and Asi Prensa, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, President Donald Trump highlights the work of police officers, and Pope Francis gives a lift to some migrant children. "228 law enforcement officers died last year on the job in the United States. As part of this National Police Week, President Trump honored those who gave their lives to protect citizens. White House correspondent Mark Irons spoke with a Catholic policeman who experienced loss but leans on prayer. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. I spoke to a retired Boston area officer who has dealt with the deaths of those serving around him but isn't losing hope. He tells us it's all about prayer as police officers across the country converge on Washington for a week of remembrance.
We honor you, and we forever cherish the memory of our fallen men and women in blue.
It's National Police Week, and today President Trump remembered those officers who have died while serving. One of those fallen was Sergeant Michael Chesna. Last July, he pursued a man fleeing the scene of a car accident. During the attempted arrest, the suspect shot and killed Officer Chesna.
He was just a solid guy. I mean, he was a family guy. He was a military guy. I mean, he's a guy that could go out there and really do the job. You could count on a guy like him.
We met retired Officer Bob Berry, who worked in the Weymouth Police Department outside Boston with Officer Chesna.
Absolutely devastating for everybody in the department, all the people that were there.
Michael Chesna's name is now written on the National Law Enforcement Memorial in Washington, D.C. And today, Bob Berry remembers another Boston area police officer killed last year, Sean Gannon, and a man he served with who died 10 years ago, Officer Michael Davey.
Tremendous police officer, good friend.
With the tragedy his department has seen, this Catholic policeman leans on prayer. Berry says he prays the rosary all the time and couldn't do his job without faith.
Power of prayer, I'm a big believer in it. I mean, there's times when people say, hey, where is God? But you see God working through these horrific situations. God is always there. God is always there. Don't give up hope. Just keep that power of prayer going. That's what it's all about. You know, that's how I feel.
And Officer Berry calls for continued prayers for all fallen officers and their families. At the National Law Enforcement Memorial here in Washington, around 20,000 names are listed. People come back year after year to pay respects as more names are added. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, great interview. Thank you so much. Finally tonight, it was a joyous ride in St. Peter's Square today as 8 children went for a spin in the Popemobile. The children are migrants. The Vatican said some of them had arrived in Italy on a boat a few months ago from Syria, Nigeria, and Congo. The Pope often speaks of the need to welcome and integrate migrants. They waved, they gave thumbs up, the car drove through the crowd, and at the end of the ride, take a look at this, the Pope did what? Here it comes, a selfie with a young girl. That's all that people do now. They don't want a picture, they want a selfie. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.